Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 17 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a powerlifter. I run Strength Guild. I train athletes in all kinds of sports. So,
this is Dr. John Mike. I'm a professor in exercise science. I like to eat. I'm kind of a food snob. I like to take up a lot of space, and I've been eating a lot of pancakes this week.
Ooh, nice.
And we got Becky joining us. Becky, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a wife, mom, powerlifter.
Sounds
And
good.
all around badass. They all talk her up.
Yep. Okay. All right. Let's start with, we have a bunch of mail building up on me and one little piece of news. So obviously we'll all chime in.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one is from Sam. He says, "Hello, huge fan, and I'll try and make this quick and to the point. Currently, I'm an undergrad chemistry student in Vermont. I got into powerlifting this past year. I love it, and I'm working on getting better for my first competition." This is kind of the crux here. "I struggle to find places to compete and train in Vermont. There are no powerlifting gyms or decent known coaches nearby. And I tend to have to travel to Massachusetts or New York. My question is, if I want to continue powerlifting after my undergrad years, what states or regions tend to have more gyms or coaches available to help? If you could move somewhere to achieve powerlifting goals, where would you go? Thanks for the response. Have a great day, Sam." All right, Phil.
Easy one. That's neat. Right now, the Midwest. You know, between, if you count like Ohio and stuff like that, as the Midwest. I don't know why, but I mean, I think it's kind of been historically strong. Like Ohio will just always be a hotbed for powerlifting.
What about cities? So Columbus.
Oh yeah, Columbus.
St. Louis has a bunch of them.
St. Louis has a good amount of gyms. Here in this area, within Kansas City, Lawrence, Topeka, there's a lot of meets going on. Like we just finished 2, and we've got I got lifters signing up for 2 more. And then you jump all the way up from here. It's like you jump over and you get out to California. So it's kind of what happens.
I think you get some satisfaction taking your crew from the Midwest to shock the Californians a little.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think just strength has been kind of a Midwestern thing. The kids in the gym and stuff is a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still got the farm culture. Kids working hard a bit and things like that, and hotbeds for wrestling and football and things like that. So
wrestling, bodybuilding, Midwest, it really contributes. I mean, if you think about some of the big wrestling, bodybuilding states and stuff, lots of hardcore stuff that you're seeing come out of states like Ohio that are otherwise often forgotten, I think.
Yeah. And I think even we've talked even Highland Games here now. We've got we're starting to get a bunch of the good throwers come out of the Midwest now. Here in Kansas within 3 hours of here, which just depends on what you call a long ways to drive. Like when I was in California, I drove an hour and 15 minutes each way to go train at the gym I wanted to train at. So it just depends on what it's worth to you. It was worth it to me. Where I have people that are like, "Oh, you're so far away. It's 15 minutes." It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's not much commitment.
You don't need to be here. So,
right, don't come here.
Yeah. If it's not worth the 15-minute drive.
Yeah, I would say, Sam, check out the gyms themselves, as opposed to, regions is a good idea, but like Phil just mentioned, where are the gyms that you hear people training at? right? That would be helpful, so.
And I suppose it depends on what you want to do with the rest of your life, because you're not going to make a lot of money powerlifting.
No, so. Right. You can't build a life around that. That's sort of the mistake I made. When I left Ohio and I went to my first year of grad school in San Diego, I just wanted to go to Southern California to be in the middle of the bodybuilding scene. I was that immature, really. Now, I had school as the backup, as sort of my excuse. I wasn't a total idiot, But, yeah, you start to realize very quickly that this, even though it'd be a huge part of your lifestyle, it can't be the sole reason you move somewhere, So.
And where was he at in Vermont?
What
did he say?
Colchester, Vermont.
Okay. I'd have to look. If he goes on powerliftingwatch.com, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 powerlifting gyms in Vermont listed on their page.
There you go.
None of them are in Colchester, but I don't know where that is in the state, so compared to these places.
Right on. All right. Next up, this is a little bit of a rant from me. I'm going to make this brief. YouTube, I've been fussing about them recently. We had a discussion on performance-enhancing meds, Phil. You and I did just 2 weeks ago, I think. They banned that from monetization. Now, I don't really monetize stuff usually. It doesn't really matter. We just use YouTube for a backup. But it blew my mind because we were reporting news, and we had a rather academic discussion, right, about drugs in sport. They flagged that, and they won't allow us to, market and monetize that. I think that's ridiculous. If some of these topics are so taboo, how you were talking about, I think one of your points was virtually everyone at a high level is on something, and if we're going to continue to ignore that through the censorship like that, you can't even have there was
an adult conversation about it.
Right. Yeah, rational. There were pieces of news in there. It was really based on news. What WADA was doing, I think, and what was happening with Nike. Wow. It's just, that's why I'm ranting about it, because it's ridiculous that that's the state that we're in, that these issues are so taboo. Well, fine. Then they're going to stay controversial. Maybe the media likes that. I don't know. Whatever, YouTube. Next up, we have something from Paul. He actually sent this through Rob and IronRadio.org. He says, hi, Rob. While I'm not emailing you to be a guest on Iron Radio, I was hoping that you could pass this on to the guys. And in addition, I'd love to hear your input as well. I've just finished watching the Netflix documentary, What the Health, and I found it rather inflammatory and filled with scare tactics. A review of this film could be an excellent topic of discussion on Iron Radio. A review of this film would be an excellent topic of discussion for the show, especially with your wealth of knowledge in physiology. Your show is not only entertaining listen, but also filled to the brim with helpful facts and methods to get gains in the weight room and in life. Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend, Paul. Paul, I did look up What the Health. I haven't seen it myself. The journalists and scientists are really reaming it for being cherry-picking. We've talked about bad science before, and apparently, I'm not saying all of it's bad. The science that they cite probably is true. I think there's a strong vegan slant to it, plant-based diets, and how basically meat and dairy are a huge source of our problems, and the meat and dairy industries are in cahoots with the big pharma industry, stuff like that. It does look cherry-picked. I haven't seen it myself. Have you guys seen that? What the Health?
I've seen. I saw Fed Up. This was like, it's 2017. I saw it. It was like at 2014, like 3 years ago or something. And it was pretty. It was basically about childhood obesity and how people just blame sugar for the cause of obesity, like all the way around. And it's pretty biased. But I haven't seen like What the Health. I mean, I have Netflix and I've seen the title, but I haven't actually like watched it. But most of those documentaries about health and nutrition, it's just they interview the same types of people, and it's like they interview so many people that are actually like more medical individuals than there are like actual sports nutritionists or exercise phys people. I mean, they don't interview those types of individuals. They all do like medical doctors or those that are or pediatric or childhood obesity and stuff, and it's always the same type of shit. It's just like, don't eat sugar, like it will kill you. It will rip your spinal cord out. It's evil. It's the same thing with like the carb argument. But I typically have found those types of documentaries pretty biased and cherry picking.
Right. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but yeah, they go to a generalist. You're right. They'll go to like a general practitioner, some ER doc. The other week they were going to one of them. The problem is, of course, individual quotes. It's not the same thing as compiling evidence and coming up with a fair review of the situation, right? You can go interview very specific people. It's like what constitutes evidence? What do you hold as being evidence? And individual quotes, for every quote you could get a counter quote, right? That's the problem with that approach. But so yeah, maybe you can check that out, John. I don't have Netflix, but if you get a chance, maybe you could bring that up in a future week.
Yeah.
Okay. Last one, and then we'll get to our guest. This is something I mentioned last week about casein and cheese. A fellow professor turned me on to this and said there's a lot of stuff going around the news that casein and cheese, obviously related, are addictive. So this article is called "No, Cheese is Not Just Like Crack." Let's see. Headlines joked about cheese addiction, but the real science is far more complex. This is by Bethany Brookshire in sciencenews.org. So I'll just touch on the highlights of this so we can jam through this. But it says, cheese is delicious, but if you saw the news recently, you might think that it's on its way to becoming classified as a Schedule II drug. Headlines said stuff like, say cheese all the time, maybe you have an addiction, or cheese really is crack, stuff like that. Apparently the study in those stories was published in PLOS One, right, Public Library of Science 1. It's a notable journal. It did investigate which foods are most associated with addictive-like eating behaviors, but the researchers are really railing against what the journalists did with this stuff. They try to dramatize a point to sort of get attention and sales and whatnot. Here, a quote. "I was horrified by the misstatements and the oversimplifications and the statements about how it's an excuse to overeat," says Ashley Gearhart of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, who led the study that's getting so much attention. Liking something is not the same thing as addiction. Here's what they really did. They recruited 120 undergrads and another 384 participants through Amazon, apparently. And they gave them a survey. They're pointing out that food likes and even over focusing on a particular food is not the same thing as drug addiction. But it says in the first experiment, the scientists gave the undergrads choices between two different foods and asked them to select which of the items were most likely to crave, binge on, or come back to again. And they had the typical junk foods, cookies, pizza, cake, stuff like that. And then they compared that with, I guess, sort of a control in a way of the healthy foods like broccoli, water, cucumber, stuff like that. For each option, the students had to make a choice, like eat cookies or apples, right? Or cheeseburger or water, that sort of thing. And then they ranked the foods. There were other things going on here, but the most highly ranked foods, the ones that were most likely to have problems, were the highly processed foods, right? Chips, pizza, and cookies and cake, that sort of thing. Foods either low in carbs, like nuts and eggs, or low in fat, like bananas and strawberries, consistently ranked low. In other words, less likely to binge on, etc. It says when it comes to naturally occurring foods, even the ones that people really like apples, nuts, and strawberries, people like them, but they don't lose control, and they don't have the same types of cravings, apparently. It says when the researchers ranked how frequently a food was problematic for the participants, cheese wasn't even in the top 10. And again, the professor who brought this to my attention was talking about casein and cheese, the casein almost being part of the problem. But again, not even in the top 10 when you actually look at the studies. It limped in at number 16 out of 35, blown away by chocolate, which was number 1. French fries and pizza were very high up there, too, in the top 5. Even buttered popcorn, stuff like that. So there's comments in this article from neuroscientists, from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, again, talking about how the symptoms of addiction, that sort of thing, they're not necessarily the same thing. It says, quote, there are systems in place that signal us when something we do is good, like eating, procreating, or drinking water when you're thirsty. But again, not necessarily the same thing, the same systems as drug abuse. It says, quote, here's a different quote from the article from Peter Kalivas, to put these foods on par with something like cocaine is pretty inflammatory. And then later, just because something activates your opioid system doesn't make it addictive, according to Gearhart. And they talk about a 2009 scientific report on casomorphins from the European Food Safety Authority stated it's unknown whether these molecules escape from the gastrointestinal tract at all. So anyway, kind of a condemnation of science journalists when you go right to the horse's mouth, the people who did the studies. Yeah, they ranked things and what people prefer, but yeah, this whole connection
makes
with
total sense. I mean,
with drugs.
do you want broccoli or do you want broccoli with cheese?
Yeah,
well, I'll take the broccoli with cheese. It's delicious.
Right. Right. Anyway, so that I promised I would bring that up. So thanks for me going on my tirade. Let's talk about powerlifting.
Yeah. So, like we said when we came on the show, we've got Becky Chermok. Becky is a lifter at my gym, and I want to bring her on. Well, firstly, just to talk about herself, and then we'll get to the topic of the day, which I think is a good one. And it's just about the kind of the upswing of women lifters of late. But Becky, let's start with you. So, how did you get going in all this stuff? I mean, athletics at all or lifting?
I've always been an athletic person, but what made me start in powerlifting was I got to a point in my body image that I wanted to lose some weight. I thought, I don't want to be skinny. I want to be strong. So when I started lifting for strength. I didn't start lifting for, what I look like. And in turn, doing that, I, lost weight and gained it back with muscle.
And then from there, how did we segue from that to competing to, on down the line? What was kind of the hierarchy of this thing?
Well, when I started at your gym, I didn't know that I was as strong as I know I am now. I not being in the culture or anything, I thought, my numbers were average. So when you suggested, hey, what about competing? I'm like, well, sure. That sounds like fun. It's all for fun.
Yeah. And I think this is going to go right into the topic of the day. But I think that's one of the things is why, women are getting so strong now is they don't have this. They don't come in with a chip on their shoulder like the dudes. Like they expect to be strong. Like, I'm a man. I can pick that up. Becky came in and was above average strong on day one, but had no clue. And was just like, yeah, I'm lifting weights. This is awesome. So, and then kind of moved from there to competing and moving way up the ranks. But so
yeah,
that's kind of how it went.
I think there's something to be said for knowing where you rank, like in norms. Like I can tell you, students, whether they're doing like a Wingate bike sprint test or whatever it is, they love to compare their vertical jump. They love to compare themselves to norms. Oh, look, I'm in the 70th percentile, and that's important information because I think like in Becky's case, you could say, oh, well, I could go into a competition and really be a threat, like be taken seriously competitively. Yeah. Not to say that you have to do that to compete. I think there's tons of benefits to putting yourself out there, putting your name on the dotted line, so to speak. But, right, that's got to be a huge confidence builder. Like, hey, I'm good at something. I'm really good at this. I'm unique in this way, especially as an adult, right? So often we're done with high school and then you're just, I don't know what you're supposed to do, but unless you take yourself seriously, or maybe you just bump into the right person or whatever, you realize, hey, something like strength sports are a great way to continue very serious competition after society says kind of you're done. You know, high school's over, college is over, whatever, you're done.
Well, I think in Becky's case, it's a good understanding of you don't have to devote like endless hours a week to it. You know, she's a wife, a mom of numerous kids. She has a full-time job, but still is able to come in and put those 3 to 4 days a week in. So, I mean, what has been your biggest struggle as far as that, like juggling life versus training?
The biggest struggle is, and still is sometimes, is the people that, the naysayers. Why are you still doing this? You hurt your back in December. Why are you doing this? You know, my husband didn't take me seriously on it until I started competing. Just this last one, he's like, oh, well, okay, yeah, I totally support you on this now. Whereas it was a huge struggle. I had to be selfish, saying, hey, this is my gym time, and I'm sorry I can't take you to practice. You're going to have to find another way there, kid, you know? And, I got 5 kids. They're all in tons of sports, right? Even one goes to Phil's gym. And, it's just juggling and getting that support to help you out with other things while you go train.
Yeah.
So
it's a big one that people forget about, especially once you have kids and stuff. Because me and my wife have struggled with this. Is that it's always this give, and you almost feel not okay taking time for you. But, you have to.
It was really hard at first, but you know, if I want to get somewhere, I gotta be a little selfish.
Yeah.
I'm not only doing this for me, but me being healthy and lifting can, I think, extend my life.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to be strong going into my old age, I guess you could say. And I think, quality of life would be better.
Yeah, I think moms have that additional responsibility. They're sort of the glue in so many ways, that keeps the family running. And I can only imagine that weird and unfair feeling of guilt, when it comes down to, like you said, running somebody to practice or going to the gym yourself. But if that's part of who you are, your family should value you as much as you value them, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely, that's something that me and my wife have had to deal with. Like, now we have set times where, okay, it's her time to train. And it's my turn to watch the kids at the gym, and things like that. And we're lucky we own our own place and we're able to take them there. And they can run around like little monkeys and pick things up too. But it's finding that balance. And like, my wife just signed up for her first meet since having our son. And it's going to be our first time swapping that role, because normally we go to a meet and she has to wrangle the kids the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's my turn to wrangle the kids while mom is the competitor. So, it's kind of finding that balance. But I think another interesting point is that, and you're seeing this more and more, you didn't start this at like 19. You didn't start this, basically you're coming in as a very competitive powerlifter. You're still early in this. I mean, what are we on? We're in year 2?
and a half.
Yeah. So we're in year 2. You're already hitting big numbers, and you're coming in as a submaster. So not far from masters. And I think that's a big one for people, is that to realize just because you're not 25 anymore, it doesn't mean you're competitive. You can start, and still, as long as you're willing to put the work in, and as long as you're not wrecked in injuries from your childhood, you can still be competitive.
If I started this in my 20s, it would, I don't think I'd I don't know. I don't think I was mature enough in my 20s.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you, before we go to break, let me ask this then. Becky, are you post 40? Are you 40 yet?
No, I'm 36.
Okay. And then I think listeners should know, if we haven't explained this enough, can you share some of your numbers, competitive numbers? Because we're talking about how competitive she is, and it's kind of a big deal. Can you share some, like your squat, for example? I saw a video of that.
Well, my on the last meet, my squat was, 402 and a half pounds. Got to get that half pound in, that counts.
Yeah.
And my bench was 181, and my deadlift was 363, I think. No, 369.
Yeah.
And I've had bigger numbers than that, but we took a big jump to 402, and I just couldn't get past my knees. But it'll be there next time.
Yeah. Basically, we took a jump at this last meet to go for that 1,000-pound total. I was like, hey, we're that close. Let's try.
Oh.
So, and I think the most impressive thing about that is, and it's been trying to get Becky to understand it, a year and a half in, how impressive that is. It's like, okay, you're now in the 1% after a year and a half.
Right, yeah.
And that's just crazy to think about.
Yeah. Well, like Lonnie was saying before the show was, we've talked about it numerous times, how many gyms you can walk in and you see a guy squatting 405, legit.
Very few.
And it's very few.
Yeah.
And you crushed, 405 in a meet. So.
Yeah, it was easy too. I mean, it was. I didn't even know what I was squatting because Bill's not supposed to tell me those things. And I was impressed it was that because it felt like it was in the threes. It didn't feel mental block, I guess.
Yeah.
So. Well, let's roll on to the topic today because I think that's going to be a good one, and we can spar up a lot of conversation on that. So.
All right, we'll go to break. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You can simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book. But that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Okay, everybody, we're back. What we want to talk about for the topic of the day is something I brought up on social media the other day, and it was after this last meet. And I think it wasn't just Becky that brought this up in my head after this last meet, but it was because there was, 60 lifters at the meet, I think. And literally the whole female class was very impressive. And the male class, not so much.
Yeah.
And, there was Becky squatting 405. There was some lady that was 114 pounds that pulled 397. There were some impressive women lifting there. And numerous ones that just started that were already hitting good lifts. And the thing that I noticed was, I was talking to Lonnie about this earlier, like 7 to 10 years ago, or even further back than that, when I started in powerlifting, it was rare to see a female in the whole flight. It's like I was talking to Donnie Thompson about it. He's like, I never saw one. I never saw a woman lifting in the meets he was in.
Wow.
And now you go in, and there's a flight or 2 flights of nothing but women. And it's also the fact that even then, since that started to happen, maybe 5 years ago, like at our gym, 315 used to be like the gold standard. Like, we want you to get there. You're a super badass if you're a female, and you can deadlift or squat 315.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in that short amount of time, it has become almost expected. It's like the baseline of, okay, now you're starting to get strong.
Right.
And it's interesting how that's happened in a short amount of time. And I would argue it's even happened in Olympic weightlifting. I mean, the ones that are really crushing, the group of lifters that are really crushing world records and national records on a consistent basis are the female lifters. They're taking these huge jumps, and it's like, why is this happening? It's kind of the first question. I mean, what's going on in society that is that's allowing this to happen?
Well, I think society has changed over the past 10 years or so. Instead of, women looking at wanting to be skinny and fit into a certain size, they're thinking more on strength. Hey, they're figuring out that you can be strong and that size.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just a turn in culture.
Yeah. I think there's an empowerment there. I think women who train seriously for strength, they can become stronger, at least as strong or stronger than an average fit male. And I don't think a lot of women realize the scale here, like how far you can ramp up, right? Like, imagine a mugger running into you. He's going to be very surprised when you're stronger than he is, and you put him on his ass, kind of thing. Yeah. So there's even the practical self-defense aspects of this. But again, and I'm not saying all women, all they have to do is dabble with weights and they're going to become stronger than men. But women that train seriously can sure as hell become stronger than an average fit male. And I don't mean an average sedentary male. I mean an average relatively fit male. Like we said, you can count on one hand the number of guys in most gyms that can squat legitimately 405. So it's got to be that partly that sense of empowerment, I would think.
And maybe just like one of the posters said on my post I put up is like women have something to prove, like I was talking about earlier. Men almost have this, and it can be problematic. They come into the gym and they have this idea of I already know what I'm doing. I know how to lift weights. I'm big and strong because I have a penis and balls. And it's
right.
like,
yeah.
Great. And it just doesn't work that way. And that's from a coach's perspective, the easiest people I deal with. Like Becky's an ideal client. She walks in and she's like, what am I doing today? I tell her what she's doing and she goes and does it. There's no questioning. There's no this and that.
Debate. Right.
Yeah. It's like, okay, here I go, and we get it done. And, at times there have to be some conversation, like she, hurt her back not long ago. So we had to figure things out during that. But, there was no ego there.
Yeah.
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 And you see it in guys, they
macho.
You just see that.
Yeah, that kind of macho pride thing. It's like they haven't. It's almost embarrassing to admit. It's like the kind of testosterone clouded brain, maybe that like they haven't thought this through. Like I'm debating lifting progression models with Phil Stevens. They haven't given the thought into the number of decades. It's like, and like you said, you could stack up whether it's education or experience or years competing, whatever it is, versus penis. That's not the equal. That's not the equal. And I could see that's got to be tough for you to overcome that. And it's got to be actually more enjoyable in a lot of ways to work with women, especially when they show promise.
Oh yeah, and the crazy thing is now, I mean, I'd almost say that almost all of our women are probably stronger than their husbands or boyfriends. And it just happens that way.
Right, yeah.
And it happens in a fairly short amount of time, but then again, women don't have that chip on their shoulder. It's like they're not walking around showing it off like, oh, I'm super strong. You get the guys that come up to, they start to become good, not great, but they reach that level of, oh, okay, you're better than average. And they have this huge chip on their shoulder, this huge head. And then you have somebody like Becky who's reaching, you're talking about you're getting up into the 1%. We missed an elite total by 16 pounds. Missed 1,000-pound total by a lift. And there's this, oh, I didn't know I was good.
Right.
Type of mindset. It's not this super macho, I'm a badass. It's like, it's just, okay, back to work. Let's get better.
If I can follow up, Becky, so first of all, do you agree with what we're saying? That you think women have a little bit less of a chip? Like a know-it-all kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think also when choosing a gym, women probably do a little more research.
Yeah.
So, with me, I went into Phil's gym. I'm thinking, I talk to him, I do what he tells me to do, and he'll make me strong. He knows what he's doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. You got to listen to other people.
That's way too rational.
Probably, yeah. But, that comes with age.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's a good point. It's not all gender. Yeah. Some of it's age, as far as maturity and stuff. Yeah. Well, if the macho chip isn't there, though, is it fair to say that you think if there's a chip women have to overcome, it's the body image thing a little bit more than guys? Because let's face it, Phil and I both know there's a lot of power lifters, and John does too, they're more or less obese. They carry a ton of muscle mass, and they don't give a damn if they have a big belly or not. They just like that game you play, Phil, that fat or power lifter game. Mm-hmm. When you try to identify people. So men don't seem to have as much of an issue with the body fat thing. But would you call that a chip on a lot of women's shoulders when they get into fitness? They're so focused on losing body fat that they don't do something that's more immediately gratifying or more sort of valid, like strength building.
Yeah, I would say that. We're moving from, I get it's all individual,
yes.
And even I struggle with it sometimes. I've got a belly. I'm always going to have a belly. I've had 5 kids. It's not going away. It's realizing you're going to have that muffin top with the belt on,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of gals that stop there. I've seen through social media, the belt makes me pudge over. Well, if you want to be strong, you're going to have to forget that, because that pudge is saving your inner organs. You've got to have a little there. You can't, be an hourglass figure and be able to go as strong as you want to go. With weight comes strength. And they also got to get off the scale.
Yeah.
It's big for women.
Like we were talking about, I think it's becoming a bigger issue for men too nowadays, oddly enough. But because I deal with both, but Yeah, that's the biggest step usually for women. But I mean, it's like once they realize, like what we were talking about the other day, you're now heavier, but the same size or smaller than you were lighter.
Yeah.
And it's the switching.
I'm the same jean size as when I was 158 when I started at your gym.
Yeah.
I'm 180 something now, and I'm the same size.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, my legs are a little bit bigger, but I want them to be big.
Yeah.
I'm on the opposite side of where I was. 10 years ago, when I'm always going on diets, and my perception has changed.
Phil, let me ask you. I imagine, like, not everyone walks into the gym and it's going to be a Becky and start, blasting up 405. There must be, in the assessment process that you have, like, you're more geared toward powerlifting, and then maybe another woman is more geared toward fitness or figure, right? Because, I mean, a lot of the things that make a good powerlifter would be maybe a little bit bigger joints, maybe a little thicker through the waist, right? A wasp waist and little tiny joints, the kind of things that might look good on a fitness or a bodybuilding stage, those would actually be a detriment to someone trying to be strong, right? So when you identify them, do you just eyeball them? Do you get some performance numbers? How do you identify someone like Becky?
Number one, like Becky came in and squatted 315 in like the first month.
Oh, God.
So it was pretty identifiable that she's just strong, And even my wife was like, "You bitch, you just came in weeks, And
I love her.
That's another thing about women too. Is like, I think with guys, it's like there's this. They're more competitive negatively with each other. And the women are all like, "You got this, girl," and they're cheering each other on like hugely. Even if they are beating each other. But I think and then it's just, I can eyeball somebody. Like if somebody, we've talked about this before on the show, if somebody comes in, they're 6'5" and like 136 pounds, and they're built to be some distance runner or something, and they're like, I want to be an awesome power lifter. It's like, whoa. I'm going to be honest with them. If somebody is built specifically for some other endeavor, even though their heart is set on something else, I will take them towards where their heart is set on, but I'm gonna hint at them. I'm gonna say, you should try this. That's like, I have one lifter, and this was like a 5-year transition. She was like dead set on being a CrossFitter, and she's built more like she's just huge, thick legs. She's not built to be light. And you look at most of the good CrossFit people, and they're like a gymnast build. And this woman is built to be a lifter. So it was, what I started doing was, hey, let's throw a little bit of lifting into your programming. And then we throw a little bit more in. And you slowly, up those doses. And then finally it's like, hey, I really like this lifting thing. Let's just do that.
Yeah.
So sometimes I got to be sly about it.
Right. I mean, hey,
I'll just
I'm
start
good at this.
raising the doses.
Right.
So.
I think that's one of the fun things about muscle sports is that, and maybe in some ways it's sort of opposite for men and women, but like you can be smaller joint and more ectomorphic, thin and angular, whatever it is, and maybe bodybuilding or fitness or figure is better for you. You could be a little bit more heavily built, your joints are a little bit bigger, whatever. You just carry lots of muscle mass. Maybe powerlifting's better for you, right? And when I say opposite, I think that spectrum serves both sexes, but with guys, sometimes it's the smaller guys, they do have an option. Like I'm not a huge person, and bodybuilding was very empowering for me. I didn't graduate high school at 230, I can tell you that. It's like 80 pounds less than that. So it gave me a way to go, whereas a lot of guys are almost conditioned, I want to be this huge bearded badass, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm off in that. But with women, it's maybe the opposite. Like it's learning to value strength and not just whatever the magazines are telling you, like this, tiny little waist kind of thing or really low body fat, But what's the price of all that? Skinny legs, not a lot of shape and muscle mass on a lot of those supermodels, I'll tell you that. So the spectrum is fun, and I think maybe men and women look at this spectrum differently, and it's important for a coach like you, Phil, to be able to say, hey, there is a space for you in strength and muscle sports, and I'm going to I like what you do, you sneaky bastard.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's also, honestly, I mean, people will enjoy doing what they're automatically good at. So if you just get them to try it and they're good at it, they're probably going to want to do more of it.
Reward.
You know?
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of it too is just the environment they get into, the gym itself. Like with the women at our gym, I think one of the biggest things is the body image we put off. We don't give a shit. You know, it's not about what you look like, and it's all about what you can do. And we champion big butts and big thighs and big lifts.
Yeah,
you know, and
right.
we've got numerous people. I mean, we've got one client in there that she genetically has a very large posterior, and it was kind of a down part of her life. And then she walks in our gym, we're like, oh my God, you know, and it's like, let's get that thing even bigger.
Awesome.
You know, and everybody, it's turned the opposite. You know, it's like everybody championed her from day one, and it's a place where you can fit in the lifting sports, and so it's what we feed off of in there.
It sounds like
I've got several.
The
Go
gym.
ahead.
It sounds like the kind of gym that someone goes to, though, is so huge, right? I don't want to sound. It's hard. Like we were talking about individuality. I can't say, Becky, speak for all women, please. Thanks. You know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not fair, and I know that. We're painting with a broad brush here. I get that, but if women on average are more social, as opposed to less with the negative competition territorial thing, if that's in fact true, I'm not a sociologist, but if that is in fact true, it sounds like where you go is a big deal, right? Like Becky, finding Phil's gym and sort of doing your homework in advance and all that, that must have been sort of a gateway for you, like some door flung open that wouldn't have happened in any gym. Is that fair to say?
Oh, totally. If I went to any other gym, it would be, it should be a different story.
Yeah.
It really would.
And I'm not trying to make this a commercial for you, Phil. I'm just trying to point out, I guess, that if women are more social, you know, and and collectively as a group, you can start to value big thighs, you know, and that kind of stuff. That's a subculture, right? Everybody knows strength sports, bodybuilding, powerlifting. We have a value system that isn't always completely synonymous with mainstream gen pop, right? Like you hear people say, hey, freaky, you know, that's beastly, and things that might normally be almost have negative connotations for the average person, we come to value, but it's partly because of that social interaction, I think. Yeah. You know, that you're like, hey, it's okay. It's okay to feel huge and powerful. That's not bad. That's good. You know, but God, to unlearn what you've been programmed with, especially you, Becky, I mean, being, and I mean this in the nicest way, being middle-aged, right? You're erasing a lot of bullshit and trying to replace it with something that's more constructive.
I've had to totally reprogram my brain, honestly. And, you know, I see my friends, social media, all my friends in real life are at the gym, basically. And just, you can really tell the difference between, you know, who's still on Gen Pop as opposed to the lifting culture.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely a shift in mindset, and sometimes it happens slower for some people than others. And I don't know how to put it. I mean, it's almost like you finally gain this. Okay, I just don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. I'm doing this because I enjoy it and I'm good at it. And once you reach that point, that's where progress really starts to happen. Yeah. And, you know, there's things like, I think another benefit for women and men is that have like body issues and this and that is now that there's weight classes. So you have a reason to weigh this much. So it's like, okay, I'm competing in this class. That's what I'm going to weigh. And these are where my numbers stack up. And I'm more competitive in this class. So, you know, I'm more competitive with 181 than 165. So we're going there. And that's why it's a reason to be this weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, greater than it's something bigger than just a number on a scale. There's a competitive aspect to it.
Yeah, it goes both ways too. Like I remember, like students used to say, "Oh, you were a bodybuilder," and I'm like, "Well, I was a light heavyweight. You know, we only weighed 198 pounds. We can't weigh more than that." They expect like the cover of a magazine, right? But the flip side of that would be, if you are larger than average, people might expect you to weigh much less instead of much more. And again, like you said, the answer is weight class, goofball. You know, the Gen Pop person doesn't really understand that you don't have to be a 275-pound pro to be a bodybuilder, and you don't have to be a 130-pound waif to be into fitness. You know, it's a weight class thing. I like that explanation, and it's kind of ignorance that you got to overcome. You know,
and usually what happens in lifting in general is, unless you're starting with somebody that's just overweight to begin with. Usually what happens is there's this progression through their career. Let's say you started the female, you started at 132. At some point, your gains are going to slow down. And then it's my job as a coach to say, well, our best bet is probably go up to 148s. You know, and then we have a reason besides being heavy. You know, okay, so if I move to 148s, I know my gym numbers are going to go up, and this and that and this and that. And then I still deal with it all the time. I have lifters that are just stuck on a weight class, but it's making them realize that doesn't mean forever. Just because you go to 181s or 198s doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. But let's say you want to be a 148 lifter, and you want to be the best 148 lifter in the world. Our best bet is probably to get you to 165 or higher and get where you need to be at 148, you know, before we come on back down. You know, it just happens faster that way. And there's usually a progression over a lifter's career where they do slowly move up weight classes. But
Becky, are you comfortable with that? Like when you look at career length, like Phil's talking about, are you comfortable moving up through weight classes? Have you had enough success already that you're okay? And again, like Phil's saying, there's a line here where you ultimately think about health and that sort of stuff as well. I mean, maybe not at a very high competitive level. It's not always synonymous, we know. But how do you feel about that? Is it too hard to ask a woman? And again, I know you can't speak for all women, but is it hard for you to say, I'm okay gaining more weight if I'm going to get these numbers, if I'm going to be master's class and be, you know, having a 1,200-pound total, or, you know what I mean? Is that a very hard pill to swallow, or are you going to embrace that?
Not anymore. Before it would have been. But I know now from being in the 165 class and being in the 181 class and talking to Phil and Sarah, and knowing that, hey, if you want bigger numbers, you're going to be in a larger weight class. And that's just all there is to it. Muscle weighs more, and if you want better totals, you're going to have to be more muscular, and you're going to have to weigh more. That's just all there is to it. I've come to accept that. I'm okay with that. I know my best training weight is in the high 170s. And I mean, it's just knowing how it all connects. And with a lot of women, I think that's just something that they just don't connect it.
Yeah.
They see the number on the scale and they think, "Oh my God, I weigh this much," but they don't think about, and you also push and pull this much. They don't. They've got to get the connection.
Right, the balance there. I imagine someone like yourself, every time you feel, like let's say you feel, you know, again, with being in a subculture, like you're a family holiday gathering, you're at a family Christmas, and, you know, you feel big, that doesn't match their expectations, but you can balance that against the successes you've had in the gym. Right, so you have that sort of balance where you can compare these two things, whereas women who aren't real strong, they don't have that. So yeah, like you
Right.
said, they're not basically making that connection that you're being bigger so you can be stronger, or maybe you're stronger,
Right.
which has made you bigger, but yeah.
Well, me and Dal were talking about this yesterday. Dal Gaines, another one of my lifters. And I think a big part to get past is one thing that he said was the only thing that's sexy on the platform is your total. It's just realizing that nobody looks good in a singlet and nobody cares what you look like. When there's never been a lifter that come with, like, there's a competition and girl A wins. She's not like, oh, I kicked your ass, but man, you look a lot better than I did. No,
Right.
I just whooped your ass. That's what matters. So, I mean, and it's not saying I'm not a believer in the big, overweight, out of shape powerlifter. Never have been. But I understand that a healthy level of body fat is beneficial to being strong. It just is. And I don't want people to be just like, you shouldn't die walking a flight of stairs, or getting in and out of your car. But you're just not going to be lean, like almost stage ready lean, and be at your best, unless, of course, there's some outliers out there, some genetic freaks that are also supplemented. But the average person, it's getting them to realize that it's like you're just not going to be at your best strength wise and be super competitively lean.
Well, men
look at the best athletes in the world; they're not that way.
No, right? Yeah, men and women. I think they've got to get through their head that you're not going to gain 100% lean mass when you try to gain weight. There's going to be a certain ratio. I mean, it's a real home run to be like to gain 70% muscle, 30% fat, but there's going to be that fat requisite, right? You don't partition 100.0% of all the nutrients you're eating into muscle tissue, even if you're training your butt off, right? Yeah. And that this fear of any additional fat gain. I once had a professor actually say, why do you guys do stuff like, you put on extra fat in the off season, and if you're just going to take it back off when you compete? Now that's more bodybuilding stuff, but at the same time, it's like, well, because I'm trying to add mostly muscle and then remove mostly fat when it comes diet time. So I'm 15 pounds more muscle mass when it comes time to compete, but again, the average person, I don't think they understand that unless you're very enhanced chemically, I don't see how anybody's going to gain virtually 100% of their body weight gains as muscle tissue. It's an absurd, proposition.
And none of us ever walk in the gym saying, dude, I'm going to try and gain 50 pounds of fat this year. No, it's just we accept a certain amount.
Yeah.
To gain the muscle and to gain the strength. I mean, that's even me. I'm getting ready for the next meet we're going to do. We're all going up to Reebok Record Breakers meet. Literally, my training starts this week. It's 16 weeks out. So since my last meet, I haven't trained. I've trained, but not as hard. And I'm 25 pounds heavier already. And I hit my squat the last weekend just to kind of test where I'm at, and I hit my last squat for an easy lift. So I mean that'll potentially be my opener, my last squat at my last meet, and it's flat out just because I'm heavier.
You're bigger, yeah.
I'm bigger, and I'm not stronger. I just can't be, because I know the training I've done, and I'm not stupid. Basically, I've trained enough to kind of maintain things because I'm old, and if I started training 25 weeks out, I'd be beat up by the time the meet got here. I'd be limping. So, I just kind of go into, okay, I'm just going to kind of train and try and stay healthy. And, I hit that lift easy. It's just because I'm bigger.
Right.
That's it.
I think a lot of people need to realize, although it's on a narrower scale, the scale of human size, think about like an elephant versus a mouse, enormously strong by comparison, absurdly not even comparison. But that's a good, I guess I'm trying to use this gross metaphor that really big is really strong, or could be really strong, not necessarily. Yes. Whereas, there's a certain requisite for bigness, for size, if you're going to have numbers that most people almost can't even process, I guess. Yeah. So, performance numbers. Okay.
Well, that's a good show.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Becky.
Becky, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I'm going to go to the gym now and start getting ready for this meet so I don't look like a dumbass. So.
All right, man. Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store. Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.